Hello, I'm Toro, and this is the Great Blunders. Every great civilization, every genius plan, every bold idea has its moments of unexpected failure. In this series, we gently explore the missteps, mistakes, and strange decisions that changed history, softly told, one blunder at a time. There's no drama here, just quiet hindsight, calm reflection, and a little curiosity. So settle in, breathe deep, and let's revisit a moment when the world didn't quite go as planned. Good evening, dear dreamer. This is Toro, whispering to you from a quiet harbor of the night. Settle your shoulders, soften your jaw, and let your breath become unhurried and kind. Tonight, we'll drift with candlelight on still water to a moment when beauty slipped into arithmetic and petals were weighed like coins. It is the tale of the Dutch Tulip Bubble, a gentle caution wrapped in color, a human hope that grew too tall, then bowed in the wind. Close your eyes if you'd like. The streets are hushed, the clocks hum softly. Let's wander. Imagine a map of the 17th century, its shorelines traced by patient hands, its seas speckled with tiny drawings of ships. Follow your fingertip to the Low Countries and pause where brackish water meets windmills and mirror-still canals. This is the Dutch Republic, new and nimble, ringed by dikes, stitched by waterways, and brimming with the confidence of traders who have learned to harvest both wind and tide. By day, the ports are a choreography of masts and rope. Dock workers move with practiced rhythms. The creak of hulls is a kind of music. Lightermen ferry barrels from ship to shore. In counting houses, tidy ledgers whisper of cargoes. Pepper and nutmeg, indigo and porcelain, spices whose scent lingers even after the crates go dark. The United Provinces are small in land, but vast in reach. Their merchants stretch invisible lines across oceans and draw back wealth as if the world were a net they cast each morning. By night, the homes along the canals glow like lanterns. Windows are mullioned, beams polished, floors scrubbed to a gentle shine. Some walls hold paintings, not only of kings and saints, but of lace collars and lemons, of flowers and copper kettles, of ordinary people leaning toward their work. The Dutch Golden Age is not only an era of money, it is an era of looking closely, of honoring the patient dazzle of everyday life. In this looking closely, a flower becomes not just a flower, but a subject worthy of attention, a small universe where color and form converse. Into this world comes the tulip, with a pedigree as winding as a caravan road. It has traveled from the stony slopes of Central Asia to the courts of the Ottoman sultans, where gardeners coaxed the bloom's dignified cup toward increasingly delicate shapes. European diplomats and botanists, always curious, always trading not only goods but ideas, bring the bulbs west. By the early 1600s, the tulip finds Dutch soil amenable. Cool winters, sandy beds, careful hands. The flower is a marvel of restraint. It does not spill itself the way peonies do. Instead, it stands, serene, a candle-shaped bloom that seems to know the dignity of its own posture. Even its name in Dutch, tulipen, feels like a measured breath. But restraint is not the whole of its charm. Some bulbs, touched by what gardeners call a breaking virus, bloom in streaks and flames, feathered with crimson on white, or milk on a dark plum. These forms are not predictable. They are gifts of chance. Each is singular, like a snowflake with heat and scent. Rarity, beauty, and surprise, a trinity that makes collectors' hearts tilt. A merchant who has learned to measure risk begins to wonder, can the uniqueness of a bloom be made to behave like a ledger line? A physician who studies plants for their medicinal uses finds the tulip's colors less curative than captivating. A weaver's apprentice, on his morning walk along the canal, stops before a window where a single tulip stands in a vase like a soft, upright flame. He feels, perhaps for the first time, that beauty might be something he could own, not only admire. The Republic, meanwhile, runs on contracts and trust, on arbitrage carried in ink across the pages of tidy books. Guilds govern craft, and the law, while sometimes stern, is practical. Markets have rules, risk has customs. There is no single switch that turns beauty into a commodity. Instead, there's a slow seep, curiosity into conversation, conversation into comparison, comparison into price. The tulip moves from garden to table to list to offer. Friends speak of varieties: Viceroy, Admiral van der Eyck, Semper Augustus, names that ring like small bells. The names hold a promise of distinction, and in a world that prizes distinction, promise gathers interest like wind behind a sail. We should pause here, before the rush, and look once more at ordinary life. There is a cheesemonger in Harlem who hums while he stacks wheels in his cellar, counting time by smell and firmness. There is a widow in Leiden who keeps bees and sells candles, trimming wicks to a precise length so the flame burns steady. There's a boy who skates on the canal when it freezes, his scarf trailing like a pennant, laughing with a girl whose cheeks glow like coals. These lives are neither foolish nor greedy. They're simply human, eager to belong, eager to try, eager to catch a little of the light that seems to be everywhere in this new century. It is into these lives, warm and careful and hopeful, that the tulip's other life, as price, as wager, will arrive. At first, it is simple admiration. A wealthy collector buys a rare bulb from a gardener whose hands know the language of soil. The price is high, but the buyer thinks in frameworks. This is not only a flower, it is a painting in slow motion, a sculpture that renews itself, a season distilled into a single stem. When the bloom opens, it draws a small crowd. A cousin asks, sotto voce, what the bulb cost. An uncle raises his eyebrows, impressed. Admiration begins to wear a thin coat of arithmetic. Then, as with many human stories, time and convenience conspire. In winter, when bulbs are sleeping under earth, people begin to exchange not the bulbs themselves, but promises, contracts that say, when the ground softens and the bulbs are lifted, I will deliver 2 of this variety, and you will pay me that price. Such contracts are sensible in a world of seasons. They let trade move when nature is still. But promises are lighter than goods. They fly further, they multiply faster, and they can be swapped again before they ever touch the ground. In taverns, under beams dark with smoke, a quiet traffic begins. Men who sell flax or cheese, sailors between voyages, a brewer's steward with a tidy purse. They talk about tulips the way one might talk about weather patterns or the price of herring. A name like Semper Augustus carries a hush. It is the rarest of the rare, a white bloom licked with crimson flames so fine they look painted with a single hair. Prices mentioned in murmurs grow bolder. A contract sold for a handful of guilders last year fetches 10 times as much today. The leap does not feel reckless. After all, everything in this young republic seems to be leaping. Ships to new harbors, knowledge into new books, fortunes across new thresholds. We meet a few faces in this crowd, not to mock them, but to understand them. There is Hendrik, a rope maker in Alkmaar, his palms rough, his posture sturdy. He plates strength for a living, twining fibers into something that will not give under strain. A friend at the tavern tells him about a bulb called Generaliteit's tulip, not the rarest, but well-liked. Hendrik thinks of his daughter, who has begun to copy letters neat as fence posts. He imagines buying her a small desk. He imagines, if this goes well, adding a bit more butter to their bread. He buys a small contract, almost sheepishly, the way one might buy a ribbon to see if it suits. There is Elsch, a widow who keeps a tidy shop selling linens. She hears a variety favored by a burgomaster and thinks, not of sudden riches, but of belonging, of being in the conversation with the people whose purchases shape fashion. She buys a share in a bulb, a fractional sliver, the way neighbors sometimes share a cow. It feels communal, a village pooling of hope. She watches the price rise and thinks, perhaps, she will repair the drafty window before next winter. There is Peter, an apprentice painter, who visits garden plots to sketch blooms. He loves the tulip's stately oval, the way its colors are contained and yet shimmering, like light caught inside a shell. He knows art prices rise and fall like the tide. Value, he thinks, is partly a story we agree to tell. Why not try, gently, to tell this story for himself? He stakes a modest sum on a bulb whose name sounds like a song. The market unfurls more forms. Options appear, rights to buy at a certain price if one wishes, a cushion against sudden turns. Groups form where people agree to share profits and losses, mingling risk with company. The mechanics are not sinister. They're the tools of a culture that has learned to model uncertainty without flinching. But when enough hands hold the same tools at once, the house can rise crooked before anyone notices the line. Prices drift upward as if carried by warm air. A gardener who once sold bulbs by digging them up now spends more time in rooms, explaining varieties to men whose fingers are ink-stained rather than earth-stained. The gardener misses the soil, but the coins are bright. A clerk who has never grown a flower in his life finds he can trade contracts with a speed that feels like new music. He sleeps lightly, his mind still tallying in the dark. And then come the stories that braid belief into rope. A sailor returns from sea and, in the tavern, drinks more than his fill. He has brought an onion from a galley, a common bulb, and, half playing, half proud, he places it near a tulip bulb on a counter, marveling at how alike they look. There are odd laughs, and the tale is told and retold until no one recalls if it ever truly happened. Only that it is useful. It says tulip bulbs are a little ridiculous, and yet their prices still climb, and so perhaps ridicule and profit can share a mug without quarrel. Meanwhile, the names of the most prized bulbs, Viceroy, Admiral Leifkin's Semper Augustus, roll around mouths like sweets. Lists are drawn up, catalogs printed. Small paintings circulate showing blooms in impossible, orderly cascades, a bouquet of everything rare all at once. In such images, scarcity and abundance share the frame, and the eye cannot quite tell which story it prefers. The blunder, if we can call it that with kindness, is not a single mistake but a stacking of gentle assumptions. People assume a buyer will always be found at a higher price because a buyer has been found at a higher price. They assume tomorrow will behave like today because today behaved like yesterday. They assume that the tulip's singularity, the thrilling unrepeatability of a broken color, can be honored best by a number growing steadily, like a child's height marked on a doorframe. But numbers, unlike children, can leap down as quickly as they leap up. The weather shifts. Somewhere, an auction meets a quieter room than expected. A merchant whose ship came home late has coins that must go to wages and would be for flowers. A rumor moves, as rumors do, nimble and without footprints. People pause just for a day. The pause itself becomes a signal. Another day, and a man who intended to buy decides to wait and see. Waiting multiplies. Sellers, who were confident, decide they would rather have coin than contract. The first to sell swiftly find buyers. The next find fewer. The latecomers find none. Hendrik, our rope maker, hears that the price of his modest bulb has softened. He feels a little heat rise in his chest. Not anger, but the sting of miscalculation. He tells himself he can wait. Rope teaches patience. Elsch, folding linens precise as snowdrifts, checks a note in her ledger where her small share is recorded. She dips her quill, writes a question mark in a margin, and draws a breath, slow in, slow out. Peter goes to the garden and looks at actual flowers, which have not heard a word of it. They open anyway, with quiet decorum. A week passes and prices step down the way one steps off a curb, not expecting to drop. Another week, and they step down again, this time into a puddle. Confidence, once so breezy, feels damp at the hem. Contracts that were light as paper become heavy to hold. Some refuse delivery, others cannot pay. The music in the taverns changes. Conversation turns from which bloom to which judge, which clause, which precedent. The distancing from the earth is felt. Bulbs in soil, bulbs asleep, bulbs waiting. The real bulbs become almost innocent, bystanders to the traffic of numbers above them. And so the blunder completes its shape, an arc of belief curving up into sky, then down again to ground. Not a moral failing, but a human rhythm we know across centuries. Hope compounded into certainty, certainty mistaken for truth, and then the soft correction of consequences arriving with quiet, unavoidable steps. Morning after morning, the canals keep their calm faces. Milk is poured, bread is kneaded, church bells note the hour. The Republic does not break. Its strength is broader than any single fashion of desire. Ships still nose into harbor mouths. Loaded carts still rumble over cobbles. But inside homes and counting rooms, a slower reckoning unfolds, like snow slipping from a roof in sheets. Hendrik the rope maker sits at his table with a cup of small beer and a slate where he scribbles figures. He has lost, not ruinously, but enough to make the winter longer. He decides to take on extra work repairing netting for a herring fleet. His palms, grateful for work they understand, find again the comfort of twine fiber. He tells his daughter the desk will come, just not yet. She nods and draws another neat letter on scrap paper, D-shaped like a door opening. Elsch, the linen seller, finds that the friend with whom she shared a bulb is also short of money. They speak gently, neither accusing, both embarrassed by the way enthusiasm has left a small bill on the table between them. They agree to settle for less than the contract promised, to preserve a friendship that is more durable than gain. The drafty window will survive another season. She has thicker blankets and a good cat who settles on her feet. Peter paints. He paints a tulip and then, beside it, an onion, both in a chipped bowl that throws the faintest echo of themselves back at the viewer. He does not lampoon. He observes. The tulip is still beautiful, even in a season of lost certainty. He sells the picture for a modest sum, enough to pay his rent and to buy a new brush with a point so fine it can lay down a shadow that is more suggestion than fact. Elsewhere, in cities touched more deeply by the mania, the ledgers are heavier. Some people who bought dear and sold late must go to court. The judges are practical, even paternal. They ask whether contracts signed in a mood of froth should be enforced as if they were for boards or barrels. Rules soften at the edges. Penalties are reduced in measure to what seems fair. This is not so much a system breaking as a culture remembering that rules serve people, not the other way around. Pamphleteers, who always wait quickly when there is a moral to declare, put out sheets with titles that rustle. On the folly of tulips, a flower for a fortune, lessons for citizens. Some are kind, wry balanced. Others are unhelpfully cruel, drawing cartoons of men whose noses become bulbs, of women whose hearts have peddled for profit. We, from our comfortable distance, might be tempted to laugh along. But a kinder gaze sees that laughter heals only when it is shared. Derision heals nothing. Better to exhale and to learn. The absurdities, such as they are gentle ones. A carpenter jokes that he will now accept payment in onions, because at least onions flavor soup. A gardener mutters that he always preferred hyacinths anyway. A brewer remarks that beer never breaks, and a tavern answers with a soft, appreciative hum. These are not barbs, but ways of kneading the experience into something digestible. The Republic's talent for practical consolation. Meanwhile, the tulips themselves, the real, living stems, keep their calendar. They emerge when the cold slackens, lift their heads, and open. People still pause at windows to look. Children still point. A few bulbs, dug and divided, move to new beds. The gardening continues. Beauty, when left to its own economy, is generous. It pays in presents, not in profit. And the ripples? They move outward in subtle rings. Investors who were too young to remember any kind of loss now carry in their bones a memory of how easily warmth can overheat. Market customs are adjusted. Some towns agree that tulip contracts made in taverns are less binding than those made before notaries. Guilds remind their members of craft's steady comforts. The Republic's brilliant adaptability expresses itself not in scolding, but in small designs. Better scaffolding around the places where fancy meets finance. Years later, when the story is told, it will sometimes grow thorns it never had. Outsiders will declare that fortunes were flattened, that the Republic reeled, that all of Holland woke in the same hour to the same bitter cup. That is not so. The Dutch Golden Age sails on, though 2 or 3 individual ships take on water. The blunder is real, yet it is pocket-sized compared to the country's larger, sturdier purse. The lessons, however, are large. The way weather can move through minds as if they were fields. The way hope can be both tender and loud. The way value likes to masquerade as truth and must be invited, gently, back to humility. When we set the tulip bubble upon the velvet of memory, we can tilt the tray many ways. One angle shows a cautionary tale about speculation, how numbers can play at being petals and petals at being coins until both are confused. Another reveals a love story. People longed for beauty so much that they believed it could shelter them from uncertainty. Perhaps the most generous angle shows a practice lesson, a society trying ideas on like garments, keeping some, discarding others, and learning how to hang the next coat more carefully. What, then, can we learn in the hush of this hour? First, that rarity can be a kind of mirage. A unique bloom feels like a promise. If it is unlike all others, perhaps it will make us unlike all others. But uniqueness is shy. It refuses to be domesticated by price. The tulip's broken colors were accidents of a virus, which gardeners later learned to manage and to value in different ways. When we admire something rare, we might ask, am I loving it for its presence or for its distance from others? If the answer is presence, the love is durable. If the answer is distance, the love may ask for ever higher steps and find none sturdy enough. Second, that distance from the earth can invite daydreams without handrails. The trade in futures and options, the contracts written in winter for bulbs sleeping under frost. These are not wicked devices, they are tools. But tools like ladders require a wall to lean against. When numbers lose sight of the soil, they can ascend into fog. A simple grounding practice, touching the bulb, seeing the bed, remembering the season, might have wrapped a rope A. And finally, that beauty, unpriced, is sturdier than we think. The tulip did not become less marvelous when its contracts withered. If anything, freed from arithmetic, it returned to its original vocation. To open in the morning, to embody restraint and color, to stand in a window like a small, dignified flame. We, too, can return from our temporary auctions and stand again with what is enough. The shape of a leaf, the temperature of a room, the warmth of someone breathing nearby. These are values that do not bubble, they tide. History's blunders are not red marks on a test. They are human pages in a human book, and each margin carries a note. Here someone hoped, and the world answered differently. If we read those notes slowly, with a hand resting on the paper to keep it flat, we grow a little wiser in ways we cannot measure. The next time we feel a bright wind at our backs and see a tall ladder of promising rungs, we might climb 3 steps, pause, and make sure the ladder is leaning on something that will not move. Breathe again with me, slow in, slow out. If your eyes are heavy, let them be heavy. The tulips are back in their beds now, and the ledgers are closed. We can let the lessons settle like silt, softening the bottom of the river, making it kinder for the feet of anyone who wades. And so, dear friend, our lantern dims, and the canal returns to its mirror-calm night. Thank you for wandering gently with me through this tender misstep, part comedy of belief, part hymn to ordinary resilience. If this quiet voyage soothed you, I'd be grateful for a soft tap on like and a gentle subscribe, so our small boat can find you again on future evenings. Next time, we'll float toward another great blunder. Different actors, different stage, the same humane lesson. That trial and error is simply how we practice being alive. Until then, sleep warmly, breathe easily, and let the petals close. Good night.